Welcome to another edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com Deep Dive presented by Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA. Joining us on the show this week is car owner and owner of Indy Race Parts, Bernie Stuebgen. Before we get to Bernie, Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA is your one-stop shop on the way to the races. They have fresh-made sandwiches and subs with all the fixins, perfect for a night at the racetrack. Dottie's has everything you need in one location, including a full-service deli, wide selection of groceries, and gas. If you're looking to dine in, head over to the Hive Coffee House and Cafe for a great sandwich. There is also a seasonal greenhouse on site, and coming soon is Dottie's Crab House, where you can dine in for fresh seafood and all-you-can-eat Maryland crabs. Head over to the corner of Canal and Bull Road in Dover, PA. Dottie's Family Market has you covered. Bernie, welcome to the Deep Dive. It's a pleasure to have you on.
All right. Yep. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. When I do these deep dives, I kind of start talking to people, see what they know about you, and not much. People don't know much about you.
No, they probably don't. I tell people all the time, it's funny. Nobody can ever pronounce my last name. So I just tell people I'm like Madonna. They just call me Bernie, and then that they can't pronounce my last name. So that's where they add. They just say Bernie.
So correct it now. What is it?
Stuebgen.
Okay. I pronounce it right. So I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And ultimately that's what I care about.
Yes.
So, you're one of the guys I wanted to get on because obviously your car is very visible. You have Indy Race Parts, but even I don't know much about your history. And what is racing been in your life, since, you were a kid and kind of how did you get involved in dirt track racing to begin with?
Well, so I'm originally from, I grew up about 7 miles from Lernerville Speedway.
Oh.
And went to Lernerville, as a kid, with my dad and watched the races and whatnot. And then kind of like became friends with Tom Hine and went to some races with him and took pictures and whatnot. And then started racing micros, started racing 250 micros in, I'm getting old, so I sometimes have to think back of the exact years. Started racing micros in probably 89, in 89. And ran, like Hill Valley, Path Valley, Linda's a little bit. And then I opened up a micro shop in Western Pennsylvania, up by the Butler Fairgrounds in around 92-ish. And I kind of started the whole micro trend in Western Pennsylvania and kind of just was kind of lull there, like just sold micro stuff and did that for a living. And then in about 96, I went to the Chili Bowl and I met Corey from Advanced Racing. And I told him, I'm like, man, I'm interested in maybe expanding my micro business. And so he called me about a week or two later and offered me a job out in Indy to build shocks and said, hey, you can come out, check it out. If you want to open a shop up here, whatever, I can help you out and whatnot. So I came out and lived at the Red Roof Inn for like 6 weeks because I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay out here or not. And then finally I committed to it and I sold my micro business to Lias Tire. And then I probably worked for Corey for, 6 or so years. And then one day I just got a bug up my ass about maybe just at night selling used sprint car parts and whatnot. And so I opened in February of 2022, Indy Race Parts. And here it is now in all of its glory.
And that was when did you open Indy Race Parts?
In 2002.
2002.
Yeah.
So you're involved in what made you own a car? When did you start that whole process? Because obviously you weren't racing anymore. Meaning you?
No, I was not. No.
When did you decide to own a car, and what made you decide to own a car?
In 2002, obviously I opened Indy Race Parts, and then in the meantime, obviously I built shocks for many, many sprint car people: Jason Myers and Sammy Swindell, Damian Gardner, many Joey Saldana, many sprint car people, and then opened Indy Race Parts in 2002, and then in 2003. I don't know. I was just kind of I became really good friends with Damian Gardner. And we were kind of just shooting the shit and whatnot. And I said, well, dude, I said, I'll build a car if you want to come and, race it. We'll run some non-wing stuff. And so he got a motor from, we borrowed a motor from Tony Smiley and went and ran. I think our first night was Memorial Weekend, the Sunday night when they used to run USAC sprint cars at Eldora after the Indy 500. And that was our first race. And then Damien, he drove for me. I don't even honestly remember how many races, but we ran about 10 or so races that year. And then the next year in 2004, I actually ran Damien in some races, but I actually raced my non-wing car at Berrigan myself a couple times. And then just kind of ran some non-wing stuff here and there, put different people in it. And then in 2009, Tom Book said I became friends with Tom Book because I was Hockett's crew chief and Book owned the car. And so I became friends with Book. Well, then he says to me in 2009, he says, hey, McMahon doesn't have a ride for the Nationals. And I said, well, I'll build a car. So Tom gave me a motor and would build a car in 2009 for McMahon and locked into the A main for Saturday night. And so I was like, I told Hockett, I said, hell, this wing racing's easier than non-wing racing. I made the Nationals. And so then after 2009, then I probably went, I don't know that I've run non-wing. I've only run non-wing since 2010, probably not even 5 times, maybe. And so I just have been doing wing racing and I don't know, as a kid, I always thought, man, it'd be cool to own a sprint car. And, and then the opportunity became where I was put myself in a good spot and have some people that help me out here and there and whatnot. And so I was like, well, it's either do it now or never do it. And so here I am many, many years later. I've retired. Everybody makes fun of me because I retire 25 times a year, at least. Mm-hmm.
So the mechanical background, because you're the crew chief, and you run the show, regardless of who's in your car, which we'll get to that in a minute. But where does that mechanical ability come from? Is it just stuff you picked up over the years? Was it something you learned maybe from somebody else back in your childhood and moving up through your teenage years?
I'm really not sure. My dad was a drag racer, so I didn't really get a whole lot of, obviously mechanically wise, I learned stuff from him, but honestly, I probably got to give a lot of the credit to Corey Phillip at Advanced Racing. He taught me a lot for all the years that I worked for him. He did teach me a lot, like just the mechanical parts of trying to figure stuff out and whatnot. And then, it's just like anybody else, like a trial and error. I mean, you just try stuff and you're like, well, that didn't work. I'm not doing that again, and then it is like you kind of, it's funny in racing. I'm sure a lot of guys would, you just get to you get a spot where you think your car is good. And then you kind of just always are there. And you kind of, well, you know what, I'm running these bars, but we're going here. So I'll run these bars, but you still stay in your little bit of a program just because you find a good balance for your car, which I'm still struggling with. I blame these new tires, but every good mechanic's going to blame something. I blame the tires that's why I didn't race. I only raced 12 times last year, just because like these guys are all running 100 races and I'm out here trying to beat them with a different driver every week. And it just isn't very easy to do.
So you've been a crew chief a few times, but that I've known you, and it just didn't stick. Why is that? And you always end up going back to your car, doing your thing, running select shows in a year. What is it about the crew chief thing? Maybe I know you were a crew chief on the 18 for a little bit and that was the deal. And then it just didn't stick. What keeps drawing you out of that and back to your own car?
Probably the biggest thing is Betsy's here now. She works full time at Indy Race Parts, but the problem's always been that I've never had really a full time employee. Like I've had Tyler Courtney and Isaac Chappell, and I've had these kids come and work part time and whatnot, but they're racers and they're going to go do on the weekend whenever I want to go away. They're going away to race. So I kind of have always had to be tied to the shop and work, and it just makes it really hard. Like you're not in the shop during the week, working on the car, working with the guys. Like I'm just meeting them at the racetrack, which is, it works out. I mean, Adam at the 18 car is great. Like he's a really badass. I mean, he's obviously shown that he could be a crew chief. The 18 car is fast on almost every night. And so it just comes back to the fact that it's hard for me to spend time to commit to it to where I make myself feel comfortable of the right decisions are being made and whatnot. It's just sometimes it's really hard to drive in at 5 o'clock to the racetrack and walk in there and look at the track and make all the decisions. And you're just kind of relying on the guys that are working on the car, that the rear end is square and everything is the way it needs to be. And it probably comes down to the fact that, and they all pay well. I mean, they all pay nice, but the problem is I always still have this is my number one job because the financial responsibility of this place. I have shelves are full and I don't want them to collect dust. And so it just makes it tough to be able to stick those deals out, so to say. I mean, I never had any issues with any of them. It's just that they know that I'm not fully committed at the end of the day, like helping, when Jim quit Anthony and I went out to help Anthony and stuff, like that was, that was a nice run, but the problem there is that Anthony obviously was getting burned out because I wasn't there to help him do motor maintenance during the week and or change motors or build a car or whatever. It was just Anthony and Hank was the tire guy, and so Anthony had to do everything, and then I just rolled in on the weekend and worked on the car, or they came here and I was working on my own car and working on their car and making decisions. And so that was a tough deal. I mean, Anthony was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun together, but there again, in fairness to the driver, so to say, on that scenario, they needed a full-time guy. Joe fit that program well for, coming in there because he could take all that relief off of Anthony. And it's the same everywhere. I mean, I have many, many people that ask me, hey, will you come be a crew chief for the weekend? And I'm just like, I've learned now that sometimes those deals just make you look bad because you're relying on somebody. They're telling you, oh, this is how it is. You show up and you're just like, you watch your car go around a racetrack and you're like, man, this thing's a piece of shit. I don't know that there's any miracles that are going to help this thing go around.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just weed myself away from those. I mean, I probably, not to sound arrogant, but I say, oh, well, it's this many thousands of dollars if you want me to come this weekend. And that usually burns a lot of people out.
So Indy Race Parts, when you started this in 2010, this is a pretty successful business. I mean, I obviously don't know your finances, but you hear about it all the time. I know a lot of people who go there. Did you ever imagine it would turn into this 20 years, 23 years, 24 years later?
No, it's funny. So I started it just as used parts, and I was like, I would just try and go. I started Indy Race Parts honestly with I had no money. I had a credit card with that I could borrow $10,000 against. So I went and borrowed the $10,000 against the credit card and went and bought some people out and didn't even have any shelves. It's not where it's at now. It used to be down at 100 Gasoline Alley. I didn't even have shelves or anything to put anything on. I just spread used parts out on the floor and people started showing up and buying them. And then, obviously I started turning that over. And so I've never really ever borrowed any more money, so to say. I just always started it off of that. And, it progressed. And then at one point there was some competition that moved in and he was selling new stuff. And I had people coming in. Well, I didn't obviously have maybe what they were looking for used, but then I had to get to the point where I had to either kind of make it monotone and it is what it is or advance. And so I just started stocking the shelves with brand new parts just to be competitive also. And it's worked out well. I mean, I always remember Jerry Russell when he owned Eagle. I started selling Eagle. Corey hooked me up with Jerry, and I was selling brand new Eagles. And Jerry would always say that you gotta, you're becoming pretty successful over there. And he goes, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I guess I said. Jamie Miller was one. He's passed away, but one of my good friends, he always said that in the parts business, it's just a pie. And he goes, everybody wants to have a piece of the pie. And I'm like, yeah, I said, I don't need the whole pie. I said, I just want a quarter of the pie. That's all I need. And Jerry Russell, I told Jerry Russell that one time, and he said, well, he goes, kid, just remember, you got to watch out what you wish for. Cause he goes, sometimes you can get bigger than what you think you need to be. And I do have to say there was a time when trying to do everything by myself was substantially overwhelming. I mean, there was a point where I thought that I was such a big time. I did actually open up Indy Race Parts Australia, and we had a full-on sprint car shop in Australia, and it just didn't work out financially. Just I had so much money tied up there and tied up here, and I was like, I'm getting upside down in a hurry.
Yeah. When you have to shift business plans like that, say from used parts to new parts, is that a difficult transition? Is that, I mean, obviously being on your own, that didn't help, but you didn't have a lot of people working there. But is that a hard decision to make? Because there is a difference between used and new from the standpoint of cost, what your cost layout is, what other people have to, obviously purchase price. Did you waffle over that? Did you just make the leap? And how difficult was that switch over to even get out there that, hey, I have new stuff as well?
I mean, I don't want to say it's difficult, I mean, I hate to say, but the sprint car market is a hoard up market. And, like you buy, like you call somebody up and you want to buy something new to stock your shelves with it. And they're like, oh, well, we have this, or we have that guy there, or whatever. You're like, well, your buy-in's $2,000. Well, here, I'll write you a check for 10 grand. And they're like, oh yeah, how quick you want that stuff. I mean, it's just kind of that way. And it's always been that way. So, I mean, it wasn't really hard. We've never been away from the used market. I've always had the used market. We actually probably have more used stuff now than we've had in a long time. We have so much used stuff that I don't have room for it in the shop. There's stuff out in trailers behind the shop, which I shouldn't say that because trailers disappear here. But I have stuff at home, on the sitting by the door at my shop at home that needs to come here. So we have a lot of used inventory that's not even here yet. And obviously we have full stock of new inventory, but new inventory is hard to get. KSC steerings are the most. I get phone calls every single day. I'm sure everyone does that has a speed shop gets phone calls every day. Do you have any KSC steerings? That's getting some of that stuff, and everybody blames COVID, but I mean, you can only use the COVID excuse for so long, in my opinion.
Right.
So, I mean, the transition wasn't that difficult. It was just one of those things where, unfortunately, it just requires more money.
Like everything.
Yes.
So you have your car, and I call it a bridge car because you don't run a whole season. Have you ever run a whole season since you got it?
No, the only thing, it's funny you say that. The only thing I ever did was I did commit to Brad Sweet, and I ran all of those high limit races a couple years ago, whatever there were, 10, 11 races or whatever. Unfortunately, I was going to do it with Corey, but then Corey jumped ship on me. And so I think we ran 11 races, and I think I used 5 drivers to run 11 races.
I'll get to the different drivers. So how difficult is it what's the plan always to have different drivers in your car all the time? Or did you not have a plan when you started this thing? Because when somebody good loses a ride, you're the guy. And then they perform well in your car and then they end up somewhere else. Does that bother you a little bit sometimes?
Yeah, it does. But I mean, but the problem is, yes, it does bother me. But the problem is I know going in that I can't run 50 races, and this guy wants to race for a living, and I can only run 20 races. And so I know going in that it'll be fun while it lasts. It's kind of like picking that dirty skank up at the bar. Like it'll be good for a few rides, but it ain't going to last. And that's just the way it is, like right now I got a good thing working with PPM, and obviously, you see going back Adam and Gio, obviously David and Cody, Ricky and Rico, right. Paul and Kyle. I mean, the longer that you could put a program together with guys and understand each other and know, like there was a time when Gio came to drive for me whenever in 2018 when he was just a kid. And we hit it off perfect, like right from the get-go. I was like, a couple different people, oh, you don't have a driver, you should hire this kid from California. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I want some kid to rip my shit apart every week. And so then I did talk to Gio, and then he showed up, and like we hit it off. Like he could go on the racetrack and I'd watch a thing go around the racetrack. He'd come in and he knew at one point, like he could just get out and walk away from it and go in the trailer. And I would fix everything that he felt like he was missing. And we'd go out there and he would run well. So yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have the same driver all the time. Does it happen? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't happen. But then sometimes I feel like that's some of the challenges is as you're putting somebody different in, like Dylan Cisney. I think, he probably deserves a good ride. He knows what he likes in a car, and I feel like he can get the job done. And I probably wish I could run some more races with him. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to, but at this point, with Parker, obviously Parker had his Guy Forbrook thing, and I'm not sure where that's at right now. Sometimes drivers don't tell you everything. And so I'm not really sure with Parker the guy is now, and I'll deal with that after whenever I have to. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have the same driver all the time. And it's funny, I don't know, other than Corey, Corey got let go from the 26, came and drove for me. And then he went to Australia. They were going to start the next season. And that would have been the first time. Well, I'm sorry, I apologize. Gio. I had Gio from 18 to 19. I would have had Corey, but then he got, and I told Leighton Crouch, obviously I built the 11 team. And I told Leighton, I called him, I said, hey, if you want to hire Corey, you can hire Corey. Like he's going to go run 80 races in your car, and I'm going to run 25 races. So it's not fair to him. And so, obviously took that ride, and then I was kind of left hanging from there. So, I mean, yeah, it sucks, but then it also is challenging to have different drivers just to see what their different disciplines are. Picky on how the cockpit is. That's the biggest pain in the ass.
With having all these drivers, I was going to ask you, what are some of the biggest challenges you have to overcome as a crew chief? Because they all want a different feel. They all, you said about the cockpit, I find that interesting. What are the biggest things that you have to overcome to be successful? And you've been able to do that.
Huh. You just kind of, it's like I told Swank one time many years ago. I told him, I said, for what you do, it's perfect for you. I said, because you got, and I don't know, I can't remember if he was with Kerry or who he was with. I don't remember at the time, but I said, it's no disrespect to him or anybody that has a crew chief, so to say, they're getting a paycheck. And so I said, at the end of the day, your paycheck is your paycheck. You could miss the show. You could win the feature. You could run 10th. You could run 24th, and you're getting paid the same. It doesn't really matter unless you get a little bit of a percentage or something. That's where your scenario is at. For me, whenever I hire a guy, I got to make sure that this guy is the happiest that he could be, because if I run 24th, I'm probably not going to race next week, because obviously I'm going to give this guy 40% or whatever. And that doesn't leave me a whole lot to be able to get back to the racetrack the next week. So I've always instituted in my mind, this guy has to be as happy as he can be. Like he has to feel like if he were in his own car or driving for whoever he did drive for, he felt a feeling. Well, he comes in and says, well, it felt like this and it feels like shit and I don't like it and whatnot. All right, well, I'll change all 4 bars. And, Joey probably saw Dana was probably, he was always a little bit funny. Like he always would, I want to be down left and I want the right rear stuck. And I'm like, well, let me wave my magic wand over this thing and I'll make that happen. And I do. And I actually enjoyed racing with Joey. Joey, Joey's Joey. And, but I feel like when he got to the racetrack and he put his helmet on, he gave you 110% for every lap.
the list of drivers you've had, or I should say, before I get to that one, I was at Knoxville one time for the Nationals, and you had 3 cars. Are you nuts? You had Kevin Thomas. You had God. I can't even remember who you had, but you had 3 cars. How do you juggle stuff like that?
That is to do that many cars is tough. I've had people want to do it this here recently, and I'm just like, man, I just want to run one car. It's just
So you learned your lesson.
Yes, you get way too strung out, and like you in your mind, you think you're like, well, I'm just going to make them all the same, and then I'll make the adjustments the same. Well, then this guy's like, oh, well, I feel this. And then this guy's like, oh, that's not how I feel. Then, and they should, but then they start talking to each other and they're like, well, I feel this. Well, I feel that. You're like, and then you go over and you listen to them and you look at them and you're like, well, neither one of you idiots are even in the same ballpark of what you feel. Like I'm watching this thing go around the racetrack and that's not what it looks like, but you have to make the adjustments to what they think they need in their mind, and sometimes, I'm sure every mechanic has done it. You go back there with a ratchet wrench and you just crank it a little bit and you dink it around on a torsion stop or something and make them feel like you're making an adjustment. And they're like, oh yeah, he cares about me. I'm going to go run the hell out of this thing.
I'm quite sure that has been done many times with.
But yeah, it sometimes Betsy would always say, well, why don't you just run one car and concentrate on that? And I'm like, running one car is easy. Running 2 cars is hard. Running 3 cars is just stupid.
That's stupid.
And I've run 3 cars. I know I've run 3 cars a couple different times at Knoxville. I think I've run 3 cars at the World Finals once or twice. It's a very strange thing to do.
The list of drivers you've had is almost like a who's who. And I'm going to miss some, obviously, but some of the ones that stand out: Shane Stewart, Joey Saldana, Gio Scelzi, Buddy Kofoid, who is, I think he won at Lincoln in your car.
Yes. Yeah.
Corey Eliason, and I'm missing a bunch of them. And you've been successful, and they all have different driving styles. Out of all those guys, the one that stood out to me was Gio winning at the Grove.
Yeah.
You've had so many wins. Can you pinpoint like what some of the biggest wins were for you and who it was with?
I don't know. They all matter. Obviously Gio winning at the Grove was my first Outlaw win. And so obviously that one's special, ultimately who would have, if we had net bets right now, what would have the odds been of Gio winning that race? If you would have bet on him to win that race, you could have probably put $100 on him and won 20 grand. So, obviously winning that race probably ranks right up there at the top. One of my favorite drivers probably was Kevin Swindell. He was very, very intelligent. Like when you made an adjustment, he knew that you made an adjustment. You never had to tell him what you did. He would go run the car and he'd come in and he'd tell you, hey, this is what you did. Like he was just extremely intelligent on how to someone to work with. So winning the Capitani at Knoxville with him was special to me because we were having a great week. We probably could have ran third at the 410 Nationals that year, but winning that race and just that was something special. I just that was really fun to work with Kevin. I don't know. Winning anything is it's funny. I told Parker just this Friday when we drove back to Lernerville and we won, and he was getting ready to get out of the car. And I told him, I said, man, you done screwed up. And he goes, why? And I said, because I always said if I could win a race at Lernerville at my home track, I said, I would probably retire. I would mic drop on the front straightaway. And he goes, well, so we're not going to go back to the Grove? And I said, no, we'll probably go back to the Grove. But I said, I'm just glad that I finally won a race at Lernerville.
You mentioned Kevin Swindell.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was hurt in 2015. I was in your car. What was that I mean, as much as you want to say what that whole thing, I was there. It was hard to watch. Obviously, I can't imagine what it was like for you. What was that whole thing like, and how hard was that to deal with?
Like, I mean, we qualified terrible, had some help, and they put the wrong left rear tire on. So we had to start in the back of the heat race. They dropped a green flag and you know, cars moved around, whatever, and he hit the fence. And I mean, I'm standing there and I'm like, well, that's a big crash, but it didn't appear like we messed that much stuff up. And I remember distinctly, I was standing on the back straightaway with Tim Kading. And I started walking back, and I walked through my pit, and I told those guys, I said, hey, I said, get a front axle ready. I don't think we need a wing, maybe a front wing. Just get, that stuff ready. So then I started walking out, and obviously there's ambulance and whatnot and everything around it. And at first they stopped me and said, hey, don't go out there. And then they said, yeah, go ahead. So I got out there, and I remember Sammy was standing there, and I'm not sure where Amy was at, but then they decided to hold those blankets up around the crash scene. And I was like, oh, this is definitely not going to go over well for PR doing this. And I remember leaning in and, talking to Kevin, but obviously he was in a lot of pain. I told him, I said, hey, I'll come up there and see you and whatnot. And I think I was running, I think I actually was running Tyler Courtney and I think Hod. I put Hod in a car just that week. And so obviously I had to concentrate on taking care of that stuff. And I believe I was helping Jamie Veal also, and so we raced and whatnot. And then we left and we went up there to visit him, and I never really knew, obviously, how severe the injury was. I mean, you heard, speculation and whatnot, but, like I was talking to him and I said, hey, whenever you can, walk out of here, we'll go back racing some more. I said, I'll run you in more races than what we run. Cause he always would say, I remember he told Shane Stewart one time, when he was running for me, he's like, man, he goes, I wish Bernie would race more. And Shane laughed at him. He's like, man, if you want to go drive for him, you need to actually show up there and do all the work, because he's way too busy to work on a race car and get it ready to go to the racetrack. And this is when Kevin lived in Charlotte. And so I always thought that we would race together. And even to this day, I don't get to talk to Kevin very often, but I would tell him, I think when I did talk to him last year, I said, hey, whenever you want to run a 305 or something at Knoxville or whatever, and we've got to do hand controls or whatever, I will build you the car. And so, yeah, I mean, after the accident happened, I remember the next day, I believe, Brad Dottie came over to me and he said, hey, don't do a Gary Stanton and quit racing because of what happened. He goes, that's just, shit happens. He goes, I'm not saying it as a impolite way as towards Kevin, but he said, that's the unfortunate part of whenever one of us gets in one of these cars, this is what could happen. And he goes, don't do a Gary Stanton and sell everything immediately because Kevin got hurt in your car. He goes, if you want to get rid of everything, he goes, I would think about it, and go through all your steps and whatnot. And that meant a lot, for Brad to come over and do and talk to me. And quite honestly, then driving home 8 hours, 9 hours, you got to think about all of that stuff, staring through the windshield. And I got home and, I told Betsy, I'm like, man, we'll just stick this shit off to the side and I'm just going to sell race car parts. And that's that. And then some time went by and then I was like, I called Book and I said, hey, I'm going to come out there and just run some races in Pennsylvania with, Hod. Actually, Hod drove, and we just made it at number 13 because that just made me feel more comfortable than being 71. And I think that helped me get through it. We just ran, I don't know, we probably ran 10 or so races in Pennsylvania after that.
Most difficult part of your career?
By far. Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, probably my first sprint car job, I worked for the Lewis family out of Ravenna, Ohio. And me and Spanky Lewis became really, really good friends. And then, Spanky got killed at Sharon Speedway. And I was just young. I was just still a teenager then. And it hit hard, but like you're still developing it in your brain. So you like, it hit hard. This is your friend that's, and so, I mean, I've had that. And obviously Leffler was a really good friend of mine. Hockett obviously was a great friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had a lot of difficult things happen to me, as far as all those friends go, but never like as personable as Kevin was in my own car. And it does kick you in the nuts. I mean, I think about it all the time. Especially when I see somebody crash like a certain way, and it paranoids me or gets me worried that for that person because of how Kevin crashed. And, it makes me paranoid that, like Chase Johnson, his landing was very, very similar to Kevin's landing. And obviously we see where he's at as of right now.
Yeah, it's weird in racing. It seems like the ones that don't look as bad are worse than the ones that look horrific.
Yes. Yes.
And it's hard for me. I've seen, so many accidents. It's just, that's what I still can't process that.
Yes. I remember as a kid, I think before I probably even had a driver's license, and I don't know why it sticks in my mind, but I went to, there was a racetrack up north in northern Pennsylvania, Bradford. I think it was called Bradford. And they were having an ESS 360 race, and me and my dad are sitting in the grandstands watching. And I remember John, I believe his name was John Zenter, I think. And he was like, they got bunched up on a start, and he kind of just turned left and hit a guy, and then drove across the track and hit the front straightaway wall head on. And then the ambulance came out, whatever, whatnot, and they put him in the ambulance. Well, then that was obviously before social media or anything. But then you get the racing paper the next week, and he had passed away from that crash. And I always think back to that. I think, man, like he hit the fence hard, but like, obviously you see guys hit the fence way, way harder and they pop out of that thing and walk away and they're mad and they want to kick somebody's ass or whatnot for stuffing them in the fence. And, it's like you said, like it's a very strange industry that someone can flip all the way down the front straightaway at the Grove and pop out of it, run back to the trailer and tell them, hey, we can fix this thing. And another guy flops on his side and he's got a broken leg or an arm or a spinal cord injury or something. It is a very strange industry.
So I wanted to ask you about just some things in racing.
Okay.
Obviously you're on all sides. You own a parts business, you're owner, you've driven,
promote races.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I wanted to, before I do get to those, what made you do that? I mean, because you're not busy enough with a car, parts business.
Mm-hmm.
I guess promoted a race. Where was it? Was it Terre Haute or Kokomo?
Oh yeah, that was Scott Ronk and myself. Yes.
Yes.
So I promoted it first started. I decided Steve Kinser's last year at Award of Outlaws, and they weren't going to have a race at Bloomington. And I'm like, I told Carlton, I'm like, you got to have a race at Bloomington. I mean, this is Steve's last year. And this is Bloomington. And so I promoted that race with 50-50 with the Outlaws. But then Scott and myself, we promoted some outlaw races at Kokomo and some all-star races. And then they reached out to me and asked me about wanting to be the promoter at Terre Haute. And at first I just laughed at him and said, no way, I got too much shit going on. And so then I called Scott and Scott's like, oh, hell yeah, we're going to do it. And I'm like, well, I don't know how much help I'm going to be. Like I always got stuff going on or whatnot. And so at first he was all in and I was out. And then I told Betsy, I'm like, well, we better help him just because. And so then we were, going down there and working on the racetrack and whatnot. And then obviously you all hear all the stories about dealing with the fair board and they are all legitimate gripes. They are the fair board at Terre Haute is like 33 people. And so, yeah, so it's extremely difficult to deal. You're never going to make everybody happy ever. And so obviously we had a 5-year deal there and we got bounced out after the first year. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I always make jokes. I have actually gone around and well, obviously with the help of Scott Ronk, I have priced some racetracks to buy, because he said, he goes, we'll promote races, but we're going to own the racetrack. And so I have gone around and priced some racetracks, and I show them to him, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And then I don't follow up, because then I think, oh shit, that's a lot of work. I don't want to do all that.
What's the biggest thing you learned? I mean, was there something when you went into promoting, you're like, you didn't maybe know, and then you're like, wow, you know what? These promoters have it harder than I thought.
Oh, 100%. I always laugh to this day. You're standing somewhere at some racetrack, and I don't know, they're prepping the track. Like it's at intermission or something, and they're watering the track, and you're standing there talking to some people, and someone says, man, this guy's making a killing tonight because there's a lot of people here. And I always laugh at them, and I say, you know what? Good for him. I hope he made $100,000. I said, because we're standing here and he's going to pay us a few $1,000s or whatever. I said, he's the guy that took the risk, and he's got, especially for an outlaw show or a high limit race. I mean, you're $100,000, and so, like, you got to be a special breed to take that risk. Because in promoting races, there's so many variables. Obviously, we all know, especially right now with the way the weather has been, there's so many variables in any of that stuff that, and some of my complaint was with Carlton, with the woo thing is like, I said to him when we were doing the last Bloomington race, I said to him, I said, hey, what's my dirt vision percentage?
Here it comes.
And he laughed, and he goes, oh, it's in your contract. You don't get anything. And I told him, I laughed, and I said, I know. I said, but I had to ask. And I said, I'm going to give you my opinion of this. And I said, I know you're going to walk away and you don't care and whatever. But I said, at the end of the day, I said, I am my own hypocrite, because I'll sit at home and watch a race instead of driving a couple hours to watch it in person or whatever. I said, but as a promoter, my complaint is that I said, here we are at Kokomo, and this guy lives a mile down the road. He rolls up here, and I got a line that's 500 people deep. And so he's like, oh, well, I'm not going to stand in line just to go watch my local racetrack. So he goes back home, gets him a 6-pack of beer or something, pays $19 and watches it on TV. And I said, then we have somebody that lives in Ohio. It's 2.5-hour drive, going to bring him and his wife and his 2 kids. And there's some clouds in the sky. And he's like, oh, I don't know if we should go. There might be a little bit of a chance of rain. You know what? Let's just get a pizza and we're going to stay home and watch. And I told Carlton, I said, you get that one guy that's going to drive a mile. And then I said, this 2.5 hours away, I said, you still get those 4 people's ticket price, and you get that guy's ticket price. I get nothing. You're still getting paid. And I said, at the end of the day, my risk factor is 80%, and your risk factor as the woo is 20%, because you're getting paid no matter what. And I don't know. Everybody, I get asked a lot about with TV, and I know you do TV and whatnot. And I'm like, I think it's good. And it's bad. I said, and I don't know, like Betsy's always like, well, maybe they should do a blackout of 2 hours around around a racetrack, so that you semi sort of force those people into coming to the racetrack and sitting in the bleachers. And I'm like, I don't know what, I mean, obviously social media has changed everything in the world. And so I don't know what the right answer is. Do we need the races on social media? Yes, we do. It just helps with trying to get people to be interested in it and whatnot. But as a promoter, you're kind of like, man, they're just kicking me in the balls. But I think your program's a little bit different, because you share where, Scott was more affiliated with Flow whenever we had some all-star races and whatnot. And so I don't know what their program is as far as money goes, helping or percentage or anything. I do know I handled all the outlaw stuff, and you get nothing from them.
Plus the sanction fee is not part of that agreement. You're paying it.
Oh, yes.
I do believe the model's going to have to change for the Outlaws at some point, because high limit, their sanction fees and I wrote all these numbers. I'm not saying anything that I haven't written about. It's 15 grand to host one of the races, but they also give 5,000 back in pay-per-view money. So you're looking at 10 compared to 25. And eventually, when everybody goes down to RPM down in Florida and all the promoters are sitting around talking, I mean, you can imagine at some point that's going to register that, hey, we get a little more over here, even if the Outlaws are a little better with their roster, and then you throw in maybe we get Kyle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, I agree. Like, well, yeah, you know how it is. The more people talk, the more that other people start listening and start thinking for themselves, like, hey, this isn't the way to go.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we're at BAPS and we give them 40 and we give them 45%.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is great.
And we pay all expenses.
Yeah, that should kind of be a program that should be followed, I believe, everywhere. I mean, at the end of the day, if Colton or Scott feel like you're cutting into their asses in the bleachers, then why would they want to keep having you come back? But if they feel like you are helping them, so to say, because it's not hurting their bottom line, then you would keep doing it. But, like as far as, and I don't want to keep hammering on World of Outlaws, because I mean, I do like to run World of Outlaw shows, and they're very consistent and I get along with those guys, but as far as being, a competitor, I feel like I'm taken care of and I'm all good with that. But as far as trying to work with them as a promoter and whatnot, they can be a little bit, it can be a little bit one-sided.
So one of the big things, we're going to get some issues now. And I always love talking to you about issues. So one of the big ones now is tacking. You see it. Obviously you're a competitor. You have the one side where the sky's falling. And then you have the other side, which, everybody's Honest Abe. I always tend, when I was at the newspaper, I found out real quick that the truth usually lies somewhere in between. How bad is it in your mind, teching in this sport, not just at the national level, but you see it all across the board? Is it as bad as people say, where there's no teching and people are cheating? Or in your mind, how do you feel about that topic?
I mean, I do think that there are definitely people that push the envelope, so to say. I do think that traction control is a massive issue. I do think that there's probably more people that have traction control than don't have traction control. And it's funny, whenever Kevin was driving for me and we were making a joke, and I don't remember where we raced at, but I think we ran third. And he said, I feel like we got beat by traction control. And he's like, the next week he calls me and he goes, hey, traction control only costs $10,000. So if we go out and win a couple races that pay 10 grand, we got our money back and we're making money. And I'm like, yeah, but what happens if we get that one time that someone figures out that we have traction control, we get caught? And I said, then it doesn't work out well for me. I said, you are just going to be cheater because of your dad and whatnot, whatever. And I said, that just gets brushed off. But I said, for me, that's detrimental to Indy Race Parts, because, I don't want to buy anything from him. All of his parts are cheater parts. I wouldn't buy anything from him, and so I can't ever, in my mind, I feel as though I don't really want to do anything that's, that looks tarnishing. As far as it's funny. I talked to Danny Dietrich last, a couple of weeks ago or whatever, and he was bringing up the wing thing and whatnot. And I'm like, I said a few years ago, I don't remember if it was Geo. I think it was Geo, but I'm pretty sure it was Geo. We were at Knoxville, and my wing was that's when I had Wings Unlimited wings, and they were collapsing under load whenever you were racing, especially when the sun was out. They would distort a lot, which is strange, but that's when they distorted a lot. And I remember I went to tech during the day. I pushed my car over, and Silva was over there, and he's like, you can finally see if your wing's legal or not. And I just kind of chuckled about it. But yes, I mean, I wish there was a I would at one time even said I would put money up if they could figure out a quick way to do traction control tech. Just because, like, if I go out there and I run my ass off and my guy, we run third and then we were the third best car, and it is what it is. But in your mind, if you feel you ran third, but you were the best car and you're pretty sure that the two guys in front of you were cheating, that pisses you off. I know Kevin Thomas Jr. was here yesterday, and he said that after Hopstad, they went deep into tech, and they actually took Kyle Cummins' mag out of his motor to send it off to get checked. So I was like, well, that sounds great, but, I mean, and then you have that whenever Perth tried that, whatever they were trying to put on the motors, and then they felt like it hurt the motor and blew it up or whatever. And I'm like, man, I don't know. Do you just say, you know what, you want to run traction control, just run it that way. We can't bust anybody for cheating. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
It's funny. I always say that the hard part is everybody's vying for drivers. Even like Pennsylvania's, I don't even know how to explain Pennsylvania. You have Port Royal and Lincoln, and they're afraid to do anything. And then I know Colton wants to tech at Baps, but he can't make a blanket rule like, okay, if he busts you, you're done. Mm-hmm. The little guy in the room, mm-hmm. so to speak. So do you find that is this sport just not big enough to do it right? Because if you do something in the NFL, you're suspended. If you do something in any major sport, you're suspended. That's it. You can't go play in the Canadian League. Here, you can just run someplace else. Is the sport just not big enough to do it right?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what the correct answer would be. I mean, I would think it is funny because when you put it that way, like you go somewhere and you get busted for jumping or something. And in typical racer fashion, F that place, I ain't going back. They screwed over me. Well, no, they didn't really screw over you. You jumped 3 rows and they put you back to where you should be. So it's not really the track's fault or that guy's fault. It's actually your own fault, but in this industry, it's a lot of their fault, not my fault type thing. So I don't know. Like, that's actually, I'm a little bit dumbfounded on an answer for that because I don't really know what, I mean, I would think that we should be able to tech, but I could see Colton and or whoever's issue is we busted this guy for a tire. I think like the shootout / Chili Bowl is a bit different because that's like a one-time year thing. Yep. And if you get busted there, then you're like, obviously hey, you're not coming back next year. And so I think that that's a little bit of a different scenario because it's a one-off thing, but if you do have a racetrack and you bust a guy for a tire or whatever, traction control, a wing or whatever, and you say, hey, dude, you're done for 6 races, 6 weeks or a week is suspension or whatever. Do they get mad and if another racetrack doesn't enforce him being suspended at your track, then they are able to go to another racetrack, right. And then they run third there and they're like, oh, I'm never going back to this place because this place is way better. It's easier on tires or whatever. That is it's actually not I don't know. I don't know what the correct answer is for that, honestly.
And now you got high limit in the Outlaws, and I don't really think they agree on much.
No. Yeah. I mean, I agree that they don't agree. I mean, I think that, I don't know, like I don't want to say they probably, and maybe behind closed doors, they do MF each other on a daily basis. I'm sure they do. And I just try and stay, but it's funny is Monday at Kokomo, Anthony brings over W9 forms and stuff. And I'm like, what's this? And he's like, you got to fill it out. And so I go in the trailer and I'm like, start filling it out. And I chuckled to Parker. I'm like, wow, I guess this is the first high limit race that I've run this year. I said, I've run, I don't know, a half dozen, 8, maybe 10 outlaw shows. Yeah. But this is the first high limit race that we've run.
where do you come out on this high limit World of Outlaws thing? You're an owner now. The great thing for you is you can take advantage of both.
Yes.
Obviously, uh,
Yes.
where do you come out on it? I mean, it can two national series work? I mean, for me, I think it can. You have 29 guys on a national tour now. I think it does, breed opportunity. Danny Dietrich won $75,000 last year at Port Royal. He would not, that race would not have paid $75,000 if it wouldn't have been for high limit. So I do believe it can, but what are your thoughts on? I mean, people are calling it a major split, and I guess maybe I just don't walk down that road yet.
I mean, I think obviously, I think that they can sustain each other. I mean, I think that they can both exist. It's like you said. First thing you say is as soon as they split off, Brad split off, and then you had all these full time teams. And then like a Hunter and G and some of those guys, Williamson, would they have jumped onto the World of Outlaws full time if you still had Brad and all of those guys still racing World of Outlaws full time because there is no high limit? I think it has opened opportunities for car owners to say, "Hey, this might be my chance to go and do some traveling," and they all seemingly get taken care of. I mean, it's like I don't support any series just because I don't have time to be out on the road every day. And it does suck because obviously all those guys get the tow money and the pit passes and show up money and everything. And I think that's great for them. And I think, they all seemingly are taken care of. So I think, that's good. I don't know, like it does seem like the World of Outlaws do have better crowds at different venues, and high limit does seem to have a little bit lesser of it. You would think that there possibly is a better crowd at whatever race it might be. But then you don't know what the viewership is. So, it could be that clouds in the sky and, there was going to be 3,000 people at the racetrack, but there's only 1,000, but there's 50,000 watching it online. So I don't know. But I mean, I think that, if they stay out of each other's business and just worry about themselves, I think that they both can survive. Yes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Safety. I know a lot of owners say, why is safety always on us? When there's a change, it costs us money. I understand that. Does more onus need to be put on the facilities you go to? How do you look at the big safety issue, whether it be from a car owner competitor standpoint versus the racetracks? And the other thing, and I hate to say this, is it almost too safe because now you got guys running over each other. I think more than we maybe did in the past a little bit. So where do you come out on the whole safety thing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, safety I think starts in your shop with your car and whoever your driver is, or the driver. Obviously, he's got to put himself in there. But I do think with seats and everything that they've done, we have made drivers way more brave. And or also, not that but I think that like some of these guys probably ought to get punched in the mouth the way they drive. I mean, that's just the way it is. um, uh, but yeah, I mean, I think the racetrack does have to have some. I think that the Outlaws and High Limit having people travel with them and knowing what to do and whatnot is a massive plus. And I think that the racetrack does have to have some responsibility of making sure their racetrack is. I mean, I have been to some places that, like, in my mind, I walk when you get there early, you can look around at stuff, and I'm like, oh, this place is kind of sketchy. I don't know that I actually want my car to go around this place. And then the competitor takes over, and you're like, everybody else is here racing, so I guess I should just race. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think safety definitely starts with the car owner / if you're the driver and the car owner, it obviously starts with you. But I think that the safety starts with your car and making sure that you have a sound piece and nothing's falling off of it, and you've got seat belts that are correctly installed and the seats installed correctly and all of those things. I don't. Someone did recently ask me about. They asked me if Kevin would have had a Sharp Advantage seat insert, would that have saved him? And I'm like, that's after the fact. I don't know. If Dave Sharpley was going to pay me some kind of promo, I'd say yes. But I said, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Those are all things that are after the fact. Like guy flips through the fence. Oh, do you think if we would have done the fence this way, that would have been better? Well, yeah, probably, but that's not the way it was. So
Hindsight.
Going forward, you change it. I think safety starts. Safety obviously, because I think we're having more people watching now.
That's a good point.
That are not standard race people. Like we have all these Kyle Larson fans that are NASCAR people. And like Monday night, I saw, I don't know, 8 people walking through the pits with fenders off of a 5-car or something to take over to Kyle and get him autographed and whatnot. And I said, these people probably maybe don't even stay for the races. They just want this autograph because they know Kyle's there. But anyway, going down that road, you have these people that are, Kyle Larson fans or Ty Gibbs fans or whoever, and they're watching, and then Kyle and or someone crashes and flips spectacularly and shit flies off the car everywhere and whatnot. And these people probably are like, oh my God, that person's dead. And their persona is, and then even so to the fact of when someone does pass away at a racetrack or something, that's a headline for all news stations. But we never hear about who won the race or anything on a regular basis. We only know about the tragedies. And so I think it does truly has to start and going back to the promoters, they have to think about that also. Like, hey, we want to make sure that this place is as safe as can be. I think it just starts at home, so to say.
Have you ever turned down anybody to put in your car, and how do you select guys or say, yeah, it seems like you don't say no very much, just in any. So,
I have a lot of dads. I have a lot of dads that want me to run their kid. And I have to, I don't want to say I just explained to them, hey, like sometimes, and even to another effect, they might have their own race team and they want me to come work on their kid's car. And I'm like, sometimes it's just not that easy. Like you don't walk in and shit a miracle and take your kid from running 19th in the B main to run a 10th in the A main. Sometimes it just doesn't work that way. Like that's not a 1 weekend thing. That's maybe a 2-year thing. And I've had people ask me about, driving the car, and many people actually. And sometimes you just like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to go race at that particular time. And then you like some guys, you just think to yourself, man, I don't know if he's a fit for me. Like, it's always like I always told Damian Gardner many times. I said, you've raced Sam Haverty is another person. I think Sam's a great racer, and he would ask for help, and I would try and help him. And he's obviously had different crew chiefs and whatnot. But the issue with a person like Sam is he's or Damian, they've done it for so long by themselves and made all their own calls, and they just had helpers that did work and whatnot, but they made their own calls. And it's hard for them whenever they're racing that they have a guy that makes the calls now and they have to drive it and they don't like the way it feels.
Right.
And so the next thing you know, that guy's gone and the driver's still there making his own calls. And sometimes I have guys that reach out to me and I'm just like, man, I don't know that guy probably fits the program because he can be, like, let's face it, Kyle never gets out of Paul's car and goes, I think you probably should have put another half a turn in the right rear and we would have went around there a lot better. Kyle gets out, walks in the trailer, and Paul does his thing and they go out and win races and whatnot, and David the same way with Cody, whatever. You want to get a driver that kind of just races the shit out of it and you can work with, like come up with ideas and whatnot. And win races. That's what it's all about. So, yes, I have had some guys that have asked me for rides and I'm just like, yeah, I'm probably going to just pass on that for this week.
And one of the big things that you see online is about the whole rent a ride thing. Okay, and whatnot. I don't have a problem with it. I know the sport's expensive.
Mhm.
Have, is that something that you have to weigh some? Because look, you have a business, three cars sometimes at Knoxville, which again, just say no. But I mean, where do you come out on that? And I mean, I'm sure somebody's brought a motor or something to your team or something at some point. Where do you come out on all that?
I mean, obviously look at Keith Coons. I mean, that's how he's been a mainstay for so long. I mean, obviously these are all, not all of them, but they're rent a rides, so to say. And if they're not a rent a ride, then Toyota pays for it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, I think that, you know, if it takes a car owner to have a kid show up with a check to keep a car owner out there, then so be it. That's what we need. I mean, like I tell people all the time, in this industry, there's way more people selling out than there is wanting to buy in. And if it takes a kid, to show up with a check, big check, little check, parts, whatever he can show up with, truck, trailer, whatever, to keep a car owner or to make a partnership with someone to keep that person as a car at the racetrack, then so be it. It is what it is. I mean, it's worked for IndyCar, F1, NASCAR, all of it. Like, I mean, if you go ask them for a ride, and the first thing, in that industry, you ask them for a ride, and the first thing they say, "Oh, how much are you bringing?" And they're like, "Oh, well, I can bring 1 million, 10 million, whatever the number
Yeah.
is." Oh, yeah, you're my guy. And then, stickers are made that day, and his name's on the side of the car, as opposed to the guy that shows up. Well, I can sweep the floors. All right, yeah, we'll get back to you.
Well, I know you like guys who work on them because I know
Yes,
Gio.
that's a like right now, Parker has he's got a full-time guy, Danny Cook, and Danny worked for him last year. Well, I hired Danny on for Parker's car last year at the beginning of the year whenever I was working on it, and Scott didn't want Danny to go away, so he's on the payroll, does some stuff around. Scott has many businesses. And then, so now, Danny is my guy, so to say. I mean, my alarm just went off, and he's at the house working on the race car right now. So yeah, I mean, Parker has to work at Schroeder Chalk during the day, so that kind of ties him up. But Danny comes down and works. Basically, he comes to my shop. My race cars are at home now, and so he goes every day and does maintenance and does whatever.
So how long do you plan to do this? Still, I mean, do
Ah,
you have a plan? I mean, is there some like what I let's just say, I mean, obviously Indy Race Parts is your living, quote unquote.
mhm.
So that I could see for a while, but for the car aspect of it, because it is, I do know you get burned out sometimes on it, just like everything you're doing and dealing with all the personalities.
It's everyone makes fun of me because obviously all my friends, everybody. Wayne Pretty called me the other day, and I don't know, we sucked somewhere, and he's like, "Let me guess, on your way home, you sold half of your stuff." I am my own worst enemy because you know uh, at Kokomo. Well, we raced Kokomo Monday. I told Parker, I said, I don't want to go to Fremont. I said, like, that's a midweek show. And I said, well, I got to leave in the morning. And then I said, I'll drag ass on Thursday. I said, it kills 2 days, and whatnot. And I said, I don't want to race this coming weekend. I want to take a weekend off. I said, me and Danny have been staring through this windshield a lot. So we go quick time there for one set of cars anyway, damn Aaron Reitzel. And, and,
Yeah.
by the end of the night, obviously we're fast, but then we have bad luck. So by the end of the night, we're loading up. I told Parker, I'm like, if I can get this brand new car built, we'll go to Knoxville on Saturday. So I'm my own worst enemy. Like, I mean, I just, like Betsy makes fun of me because she's like, you always tell people you're quitting and you're done and you're over it and you're in a bad mood and whatnot. And then she said, then you show up at the race, then you show up and race 3 nights in a row. Like she goes, you got to just keep your mouth shut and either quit or keep racing, figure it out.
Just say no. Just,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which is, I guess, good for her. You don't, hey, I want to
Mm-hmm.
buy something. You
Yeah,
can't say no.
she loves the race car probably more than I do. She does love going to the races and whatnot. Unfortunately for her, she had another job, and we had part-time Johnny Heinright here and whatnot, and she could go to the races, but then she doesn't have that job anymore. So now she's here full time. Well, now I feel bad for her because now she's stuck here and I'm going out racing. So she only gets to she only gets to watch it on the computer, which is great to have that. That she can do that, but yeah, she doesn't get to go to as many races now as what she used to go to.
Well, Bernie, I could talk to you all day. I don't want to keep you. I know you're busy. We've already established that, but I appreciate you coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you. I know I talked to you at the track, and it was good to get kind of that background on you and kind of see what's going on and well, I guess who you are now. You're not so mysterious.
Yes.
So, but thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, I got this. This is This is number one right here. That's old Stitchy right there. He comes to the shop every day and greets the customers.
I have a cat who's laying over on my couch now, so it's easy for me to go places then. They just have a litter box.
Yeah, these dudes make it difficult sometimes to get take them to the racetrack and whatnot. Yes.
Bernie, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your time, and I'm sure we'll see you soon at a track somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, well, I'll be at Port Royal next week.
There you go.
For sure.
Then we'll see you then.
All right. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. That's going to wrap up another edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com Deep Dive presented by Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA. Thank you to Bernie Stuebgen for joining us on the show. A lot of good stuff there. Also, if you like the content on our YouTube channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can also check out our daily exclusive content at SprintCarUnlimited.com. We'll be back next Thursday with another edition of the Deep Dive.